In the first solve, we have a pretty straightforward cross. Blue and orange can be solved in one move, and red and green are pretty close too. So your cross solution was D prime, F prime, R prime, L, B, L. So your cross solution was pretty good, but if you held the cube like this, you wouldn't have to do B moves to insert the green, and it would be easier to execute. So in this position, you would do it like this. Alright, next for the first pair, you solved this, and that was fine. And then you went for this pair with the U2 and then the sledgehammer. That was fine as well. And here you did L prime U L to pair up these two, and you did a D. So in this case, I would probably just rotate because for me during competition, or if I'm turning like a little faster, it's a little hard for me to do these wide D moves like consistently. So yeah, and then here you just inserted the pair. But when you just insert the pair, you have a really bad last pair. So instead, I would do a D using keyhole, and then I can multi-slot here. So if I do a double sexy, that pairs or changes the orientation of this corner. So when I do a D prime to realign my cross, this pair is solved, and then we have a paired up pair on top right here that we were just going to insert before. Alright, so instead you just inserted this pair, and then took out this pair, and then broke it apart, and then paired them up, and inserted. So then you have OLA, pretty standard, and then PLL. Here I would recommend you to switch to a different G-perm algorithm, just because I think the RUD and non-rotation G-perms are more consistent, and doing wide moves sometimes there's more of a chance for messing up. So this is your second solve. We already have the green and the blue opposite each other in their right slots. The orange should be over here, but it can we have red, and then we can influence that. So your solution was to do D prime, U2 to put the red in the slot, L2, U2, R2. Instead, you could have done this 2-gen using only R and D moves. So since we know that orange and red need to be swapped, we can do a D, R2. So now these three pieces are all in their correct places, and then D2, and then R2. But before I do R2, I would do R prime, U2, R prime, so then we can preserve this pair, and then we can just use it as our first pair. Your first pair was this. I would probably go for these two, since I know that for my next pair, I can predict that these are not going to be a very good case if I start with this. It's probably going to get flipped to that side, and then it's going to require a sledgehammer. So you just broke them up here, rotated, and then inserted to the back. And yeah, see, now you have a pretty bad pair for the second pair, which you fumbled a little with. So you did U prime, F prime, and then you did another U prime, and then you saw these two pairs, and then you paired them up using a lefty sledge, and that was pretty good. So then you did a U2 and then inserted them. So next you did this pair, and you broke them up like that, and then inserted. However, I think a better choice would be to do a U2 and then break them up in the back. And then when you insert to the back, you have an alright last pair, while breaking up in the front, like how you did it, and then inserting would give you a bad pair, which requires a rotation. So then you did a U2 and then U2 R prime to break them apart, and then you inserted to the back, but you use a D move, so it's like what I said before. It's personal preference depending on what suits you better, but I would personally just rotate. So then this case you did a different OLO algorithm. I would recommend you to just use a normal one, which is like this, and we got a PLL skip on that one. Alright, this is the third solve. The cross is actually pretty terrible for white cross, so I would probably choose a different cross color like orange, but you're probably only a white cross solver. So your solution was R prime, U2, F, L, R2, B, D prime. For your first pair, you went for the red and blue pair by taking it out like this. And then you would have to insert it over here, which is kind of awkward. So I would choose this as my first pair, since I can just solve this entire thing without any regrips or rotations. And then I can go on to maybe like solve this orange and blue pair, or then I can just go into this. Okay, so you took out this edge, and then paired them up, rotated, and then inserted to the back. Next, you went for the orange and blue, and you did another cube rotation and then inserted like that to this. In my opinion, I think you could have just done the L moves like that and then paired them up that way instead of having to rotate first and then do it. I just think it's like easier. And then you could have like sledgehammered it in using F moves and then worked with this. But then you rotated and then solved this pair, like that, and then inserted to the back. Now you picked the red and green, so you did a U and then set them up using L moves. That's good. And then inserted. Here you used a F2L trick, which is good for some situations, but it didn't work in this situation since all of these edges are already orientated. If you just did a rotation and then a simple insert and then paired them and then inserted to the back, you would have had a pretty good OLO. But you did it in this way that didn't require a rotation. But then you wouldn't have as good as an OLO. So in that case, I would go with the rotation that gives you a cross on top. This is the fourth scramble. So you did D prime, R, F, L, U, Y, D, and then L2 to solve your cross. I think your solution used a bit too many layers to solve the cube, or the cross, and it required a YD move, which is basically a rotation. So for this, I would do a D prime, F prime, R prime. That solves the red and green pair, or cross piece, and it sets up the orange to be inserted in one move, D2, and then R2. And then we were able to track this pair as our first pair. Okay, so following your solution, your first pair was the green and red. I would have hoped that you would have seen this and been able to insert it like that using an F sledgehammer, and then you would have set up your next pair. Alright, so following your solution, you paired up the green and red, inserted, and then you did a cube rotation and then solved the green and orange pair next. Pretty straightforward. And then you did the red and blue. So yeah, that's good. And then finally for the orange and blue, you did a U prime and then sledgehammer and to solve it. That's pretty good. Alright, and then OLA. And then here for PLL, it's also pretty straightforward. It's just an E prime. And you did pretty good on that. Alright, this is the fifth solve, and your cross solution was fine. So what you did was U prime, R prime, D2, and then that lets you pair up the blue and the green cross piece together, and then R2 to finish off, and then D to finish your cross. So that was a fine solution. So your first pair was the red and green. I would have probably started with the orange and green, but your solution didn't affect it at all, like this solved pair. So yeah, that was good. And then you insert it to the back. And then you did a rotation and then paired it to the back, or inserted it to the back. And then there was a bit of struggle maybe because you were looking for the F12 pair. But then you did the orange and blue, which I wouldn't recommend actually. I would go with this pair first. Then, cause like this is a really bad pair, cause you have to take it out and like break it up and then pair them together. But if you could be inserting another pair into the slot while you're taking the pair out, which is like you're doing two things at once, then it makes it not that bad of a case. So then you took it out like that, and then you broke them apart, and then you paired them together. Then you did that, and then inserted. So here, before you insert this pair, you could take out this one, do a D prime, so like the keyhole method, since we already had this edge solved in its correct slot, so then we would just insert, do a D, and then we just finish inserting this last pair. And then you wouldn't have to like end up with this pair for your last pair. So for your OLO, I saw that you were using the lefty version of it. So if you're not left-handed, I would recommend you to switch to the righty version of it, which is and your Z perm, you have to change it. So this is the standard one. And I think it's a lot faster than how you were trying to finger trick yours. So definitely switch to this version. So my 3 tips and things that you need to work on include 1, your look ahead to decrease pauses. 2, your cross to F12 transition, where you should try to like predict where the corner or edge or even both are during inspection. You can use a limited inspection for that since it's going to be really hard when you first start out. And 3, better algorithms. You need to drill them and find efficient and fast algorithms that let you execute them very quickly and consistently.